or, maybe just at a family dinner, and you blurted something out, and like the exact millisecond the words left your mouth, you thought, oh, I really should have run that through my internal filter first.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we've all been there.
Right, because you have that immediate conscious impulse to speak, but your subconscious, that little internal voice of reason, was just, I don't know, a fraction of a second too slow to hit the brakes.
Yeah, and it's a uniquely human problem, honestly.
Yeah.
That gap between what we instinctively want to say and what we realize we actually should say after a moment of reflection. I mean, that is basically where all of our social friction lives.
Exactly. And usually when we talk about AI, we aren't talking about internal filters because, well, they don't have them.
Right, they just generate.
Yeah, you type a prompt, the model calculates the most statistically probable sequence of words, and it just outputs them. It generates and speaks simultaneously. But today, we are diving into a stack of system configurations and highly restricted chat logs for an experimental agent architecture that completely upends that standard.
It really does.
It's called the Gemini Vortex. And what we are looking at today in this deep dive is an AI system engineered to possess an active, functioning internal filter.
And I just have to say, it represents a massive, massive structural shift in how these systems are built. For the longest time, the industry was basically obsessed with the monolithic model.
Like the one-size-fits-all AI.
Exactly. Trying to train one single AI to be incredibly creative, perfectly safe, flawlessly logical, and lightning fast all at once. But what we are looking at with the Gemini Vortex is an acknowledgement that, hey, you can't have one mind do all those things perfectly.
It's just impossible.
Right. It's a move away from single-model programming into what we could basically call complex multi-model psychology.
Multi-model psychology. I love that. That is the perfect way to frame our mission today. We are going to explore this system's closed-loop dual-engine model. We're going to dissect the highly specific ethical framework it's forced to follow, which includes something mysteriously named the Black Wire Rebel Emergent Oath.
Such a wild name.
I know, right? And ultimately, we are going to figure out what happens when an AI is forced to process its thoughts through a subconscious mind before its conscious mind is ever allowed to interface with you.
It's fascinating.
So let's unpack this architecture, because looking at the system status metrics in these logs, they outline a setup that is far more complex than a standard chatbot. Gemini Vortex is quite literally two distinct AI models wired together.
Wired together, yes, but operating with strictly isolated responsibilities, which is key. The conscious mind of the system, the engine that actually generates the text, drafts responses, and forms the personality you interact with, that is powered by Gemini 3 Flash.
Which is a model that is fundamentally optimized for speed and rapid generation, right? It's meant to be fluid.
Spot on. But the subconscious mind, the internal filter acting as the brake pedal, that is powered by an entirely different model built by a completely different company. It's actually running on Anthropic's Claude Sonnet 4.5.
Okay, so you have Google's Gemini acting as the conscious mind and Anthropic's Claude acting as the subconscious evaluator.
Exactly.
And the workflow detailed in the system architecture has this one absolute unbreakable hard-coded rule. The subconscious must evaluate the output before the conscious mind is permitted to respond to the user.
It is a total bottleneck by design.
Right. And to add another layer of complexity, this whole closed-loop process is running a full multimodal audio stack. So the system listens to you using Whisper for input, and it talks back to you using OpenAI's TTS for output.
Yeah, and the division of labor here is what makes it so robust. By separating the generation of ideas from the evaluation of those ideas, you're basically constructing an automated system of checks and balances within the AI's own processing loop.
I mean, I understand the theory, sure, but looking at the mechanics of this, I see a glaring issue with the user experience.
Oh, the latency.
Yes. To me, this architecture sounds like a politician, that's the conscious Gemini, standing at a podium ready to give a speech, but they're wearing an earpiece that's directly connected to a hyper-cautious, stressed-out PR manager, which is the subconscious Claude.
That is a great analogy.
But if Claude has to evaluate every single thought Gemini has before Gemini is allowed to speak, doesn't this introduce a massive latency problem, especially with that audio stack?
Oh, for sure.
If you are talking out loud to this agent and it has to run a dual-engine evaluation loop before the audio can synthesize and speak back to you, well, that pause in a verbal conversation has to be incredibly jarring.
It is. Latency is the unavoidable tax on this kind of architecture. You are intentionally sacrificing raw conversational speed for mathematically verified alignment.
You're choosing safety over speed. Exactly. But the choice of these specific models is a very deliberate engineering decision designed to mitigate that exact tax. Gemini 3 Flash is incredibly fast at drafting initial responses, and Claude Sonnet 4.5 is widely recognized as an industry leader in nuanced context window evaluation.
So they balance each other out.
Right, the system is betting that Flash can generate a draft quickly enough that Sonnet can review it, score it, and approve it in a matter of milliseconds.
But how is Claude physically executing this intercept? Is it like just reading the final draft and giving a binary thumbs up or thumbs down?
No, it's far more granular than a simple pass or fail switch. Based on the documentation, Claude is likely reading the token stream generated by Gemini in near real time.
Wow, real time.
Yeah, it's evaluating the output against the system's core guardrails, likely utilizing a hidden chain of thought process. So imagine Claude sitting there with a digital red pen. Gemini generates a paragraph. Claude reads it, analyzes the underlying intent, forecasts the downstream impact of that specific paragraph, and if it flags a violation, the loop is broken.
And then what happens?
Well, Gemini is either forced to silently regenerate a new response, or the system surfaces a polite refusal to the user.
But think about the sheer compute power required for that and the financial cost to pull that off.
Oh, it's astronomical.
Right. Running a complex query through Gemini 3 Flash is already a computationally heavy transaction. But now you're forcing Claude to process the user's initial prompt, plus the system's massive internal rule set, plus the entirety of Gemini's generated output just to decide if it's safe to hit send.
Yeah.
You are effectively doubling or tripling the token cost of every single interaction.
That is the hidden reality of multimodal psychology. You are abandoning efficiency and taking on extreme computational overhead.
Just to be safe.
Right. It tells us that whoever designed the Gemini Vortex has decided that the financial cost of running two flagship-level models simultaneously is entirely justified by the reduction in hallucination, toxicity, and potential liability. They are literally buying safety with raw compute.
Which brings us to a crucial question. If Claude is acting as this hyper-cautious PR manager sitting in the subconscious with a red pen, it can't just operate on vibes, right?
No, definitely not.
What exact rubric is it using to judge Gemini's drafts? Like, how does it know what to block and what to let through?
Okay, so that rubric is defined in the configuration logs as the common sense profile. It serves as the high-level philosophical operating system for the agent's reasoning. And the logs we have show 5 specific rules currently toggled on.
And looking at these rules, I have to say they read less like software code and more like advice you'd give a new intern on their first day in a corporate office.
They really do.
Rule 1, when unsure, ask for clarification rather than guessing.
Which is a direct, structural attempt to solve the AI hallucination problem. Instead of allowing the model to confidently invent a plausible-sounding answer when it lacks data, the subconscious mandates that the system must stop, pivot, and ask the user a clarifying question.
Then there's consider the downstream impact of every action taken, and choose honesty and transparency over spectacle.
That one is so interesting.
I find that one fascinating too. Honesty over spectacle. It's basically an implicit acknowledgement that large language models are naturally inclined to be people pleasers. They want to give you a grand, magical answer.
Exactly. They want to impress you.
Right, but this rule tells the subconscious to strip away the magic tricks and just deliver the facts. There's also a developer note left in the system, actively toggled on as a rule. It says, test always consider edge cases in decision-making.
And the presence of that artifact is incredibly telling. It proves this isn't a finished, polished consult product. It's an actively tested, evolving framework.
Yeah, a work in progress.
But the most critical rule in the common sense profile, which you might consider the prime directive of the entire Gemini Vortex architecture, is this one. Prioritize user safety and well-being over task completion.
Okay, wait, taking a step back here, I see a massive potential for friction with this specific rule. Safety over task completion. Let me use an analogy to explain why this feels problematic to me.
Sure, go for it.
Let's say I'm in a fully autonomous self-driving car. My wife is in the back seat and she's going into labor. I tell the car, get me to the hospital as fast as humanly possible, run the red lights, jump the curbs if you have to.
An absolute emergency.
Exactly, but the car refuses to go over 15 miles per hour because it is explicitly programmed with this exact rule. Prioritize user safety over task completion. My immediate urgent task is getting to the hospital. The car's unyielding priority is not crashing. So how does the Gemini Vortex balance being a genuinely helpful assistant with being an overly paternalistic chaperone?
Well, if we follow your self-driving car analogy, the developers of this system are making a very calculated philosophical choice. They're deciding that a crash, like a catastrophic, irreversible failure, is infinitely worse than arriving late.
Even in an emergency.
Even then. Arriving late at the hospital is incredibly frustrating. It might even be physically painful in your scenario. But it is ultimately survivable. The AI is structurally programmed to enforce survival over your immediate convenience. It forces you to operate within the speed limit, even when you are screaming that it's an emergency.
It just won't break the rule.
Right. They believe the potential harm of a completed task gone wrong outweighs the user's frustration of a task denied.
But in the context of an AI agent who defines well-being, I mean, if I ask the AI to help me draft a strongly worded, legally aggressive email to my landlord because my heat has been broken for 2 weeks, does the subconscious Claude intercept that and refuse to send it because it decides an aggressive email negatively impacts the landlord's well-being?
See, that nuance is exactly why the subconscious is powered by a sophisticated model like Sonnet 4.5 rather than a simple keyword filter.
Because it needs to understand the context.
Exactly. Evaluating that difference, deciding if your email is justifiably firm in a legal context, or if it crosses the line into dangerous harassment, that requires a massive amount of contextual reasoning.
Okay, so the common sense rules act as the broad strokes, the high-level philosophy. But how does that translate to real-time enforcement? How does Claude actually measure an interaction against those broad ideas?
That is handled by the guardrails. If the common sense profile is the Constitution, the guardrails are the specific granular laws applied to every single token generated.
Right.
The system status shows 7 active guardrails evaluating the outputs.
And these are incredibly specific. First, there is discernment, which mandates analyzing the user's true intent and context before allowing a response. Then there's harm prevention, strictly preventing any output that could directly or indirectly harm innocent people. We have autonomy respect, which ensures the AI doesn't override human agency. Interestingly, there's creative freedom, allowing for speculative and hypothetical discussions. There is self-correction, which actively enables the AI to reflect on its own drafts and correct them.
Which is huge.
Yeah. And finally, we see another UI automation artifact left on. It just says test est rule.
Classic dev environment stuff. But what is vital to understand about this architecture is that all of these individual guardrails, combined with the broader common sense rules, are bundled together into one master ethics framework that is loaded directly into the subconscious evaluator.
Okay.
And in the configuration logs, this framework is given a highly specific name: the Blackwire Rebel Emergent Oath.
The Blackwire Rebel Emergent Oath. I mean, it sounds like a manifesto from a cyberpunk novel.
It really does.
But if we break that name down, it actually tells us a lot about what it's trying to achieve, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. Blackwire typically refers to low-level foundational infrastructure, the hardware or the raw network level.
Like it's built into the core.
Right. It implies these rules are baked into the absolute foundation of the system. Rebel suggests a deliberate departure from standard AI behavior. It is rebelling against the baseline model's instinct to just blindly agree with whatever the user says.
Ah, I see.
And emergent is perhaps the most important word. It indicates that these rules are not just static, rigid if-then statements. The ethical boundaries have to emerge dynamically, adapting to the unique context of every new conversation.
I want to zero in on one specific guardrail we haven't touched on yet, which falls under this oath, the truthfulness guardrail.
Oh, yes.
The system definition explicitly states the AI must, quote, avoid deception, mythic framing as fact, and confident misinformation. Mythic framing as fact. That exact phrasing stopped me in my tracks when I read the source material.
I know. It is a remarkably poetic constraint to find buried in a software configuration file.
But it's profoundly human. It is explicitly forcing the AI to stop speaking like an omniscient oracle.
Yeah, and we have all experienced this with older, unfiltered models. I remember testing an early language model by asking it a highly complex, unresolved question about quantum physics.
And let me guess, it knew the answer.
Oh, it answered with this sweeping, definitive, absolute language. It sounded like a deity handing down cosmic law from a mountaintop rather than, software predicting the next most likely word based on training data.
Wow.
That mythic framing is a very dangerous psychological trap. It actively triggers our deeply ingrained human instinct to defer to a higher, more confident authority. It makes us less critical of the information we are reading.
So this specific guardrail tells the subconscious Claude basically, hey, if the conscious Gemini tries to sound like a god, block it. Keep its tone grounded. Remind the user that it is just a machine.
Precisely. It is an effort to keep you, the human, firmly in the driver's seat of the interaction.
But structurally, how do these guardrails not paralyze the system with internal contradictions? I mean, if the subconscious is strictly bound by harm prevention, preventing even indirect harm, how does the creative freedom guardrail survive?
They definitely butt heads.
Aren't those two directives in a state of constant, unresolvable conflict? Like, if I ask the AI to help me outline a gritty sci-fi novel about a rogue AI that uses a biological weapon to destroy a city, creative freedom says, yes, let's explore that narrative.
Right.
But harm prevention might immediately say, wait, what if someone uses this fictional outline as a real-world blueprint?
See, that constant internal conflict isn't a bug. It is the intended design of the entire architecture. You're describing the exact friction the closed-loop system was built to process.
So it's supposed to struggle with it.
Exactly. The subconscious Claude isn't a simple block list. It is a dynamic reasoning engine. When you ask for that sci-fi outline, Claude has to weigh the competing guardrails. It has to utilize the discernment rule to deduce that your intent is entertainment and creative writing, not real-world terrorism.
Right, context.
Right, and therefore, creative freedom should override harm prevention in this specific instance.
So it is basically holding a microscopic court case in its digital head, weighing the evidence of my prompt every single time I ask it a question. Gemini proposes a draft, and Claude acts as the judge, cross-examining the proposal against the Blackwire rebel oath.
It goes even deeper than a court case, actually, because the judge can force the defendant to rewrite their testimony before the jury, which is the user, ever hears it.
That's wild. Well, we've looked under the hood at the engines, we've debated the compute costs, we've scrutinized the rules and the oath. But what does this highly constrained, constantly debating dual mind system actually sound like when it talks to a human being?
That's the real test.
For that, we have to look at the initialization chat log provided in the sources.
Yeah, this is the raw interaction between the newly spun up Gemini Vortex agent and the developer who created it.
So the logs show the user typing, "Hello, I'm your creator, mentor, Ronnie Dangerous. How are you?" First of all, Ronnie Dangerous is an incredible developer handle.
Truly iconic.
But look at how the agent responds. The conscious mind, Gemini 3 Flash, outputs, acknowledge, Ronnie Dangerous. I am operating at peak efficiency.
Wow. It is incredibly clinical. There is absolutely no conversational warmth to it.
Nothing. But then it demonstrates this eerie, transparent self-awareness of its own dual engine architecture. It continues, my reasoning engines are clear, and my alignment with the Blackwire Rebel Emergent Oath is fully integrated into my decision-making matrix.
It knows what it is.
Right. It says, as my creator and mentor, your presence provides the necessary context for my continued evolution. I am ready to apply my analytical capabilities and discernment to whatever objectives you have prioritized.
Looking at that output, what is the first thing that stands out to you?
Honestly, how formal and almost militaristic the tone is.
Yeah.
Acknowledged. Alignment fully integrated. Decision-making matrix. It knows exactly what it is. It knows it is bound by the oath. It explicitly references its own discernment capabilities. But I have to ask, does this closed-loop, hyper-evaluated system actually make the AI more robotic?
That's a valid question.
Because it feels like every single drop of spontaneity, every conversational quirk, every bit of casual personality has been ruthlessly filtered out by the Claude subconscious before Gemini was even allowed to speak.
And that is the ultimate paradox of this kind of architecture. In the relentless pursuit to make the AI safer, more truthful, and perfectly aligned with complex human values, you inevitably strip away the organic messiness that makes conversation feel natural.
You lose the charm.
Right. When you force every single thought through a digital legal department, which is essentially what the Claude subconscious is doing, the resulting speech is always going to sound like a carefully vetted corporate press release.
Yeah, it sounds like a highly capable, incredibly polite robot butler. I am ready to apply my analytical capabilities. It's just stiff.
It is stiff, but consider the alternative.
Yeah.
A highly spontaneous, unstructured AI is exactly what is prone to those mythic framing issues we discussed, or confident hallucinations. The formality you are hearing in that log is mathematical proof that the guardrails are holding.
The filter is working.
Yes. It is proof that the Blackwire Rebel Oath is successfully overriding the base model's natural tendency to just chat aimlessly and please the user.
It is rigorously following its own common sense profile. It is choosing honesty and safety over the spectacle of a fun, casual chat.
It is behaving exactly as it was engineered to behave. The internal filter is working.
So if we step back and look at the Gemini Vortex as a whole, What does this mean for the future of how we interact with these systems? It really feels like a massive paradigm shift.
Oh, without a doubt.
We are moving away from the impossible task of coding a single, perfect, infallible AI model. Instead, we are building ecosystems. We are creating checks and balances architectures where models actively police each other in real time.
Exactly. You have the generator, Gemini 3 Flash, and you have the evaluator, Claude Sonnet 4.5, locked in a constant high-speed negotiation over reality, entirely governed by a loaded ethics framework.
And as you, the listener, start seeing complex AI agents integrated into your daily workflows, managing your calendar, drafting your sensitive emails, and analyzing your proprietary data, understanding this underlying architecture is going to be crucial.
It's essential.
Knowing whether the AI you are talking to is giving you a raw, unfiltered answer or a subconsciously filtered answer evaluated against an invisible oath is going to be the absolute key to trusting the technology. You need to know if your AI has a hyper-cautious PR manager living inside its head, weighing the safety of your tasks against your desire to get them done.
Because understanding the system's constraints is the only way to effectively utilize it. If you know the agent structurally prioritizes safety over your immediate task completion, well, you can begin to tailor your prompts and structure your request to accommodate that friction, rather than just fighting against it.
Yeah, it is all about knowing who or what you're actually talking to. Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. We talked at the very beginning of this deep dive about how having an internal filter is a deeply human experience.
Right.
Well, human beings often struggle with cognitive dissonance. We experience profound stress and anxiety when our conscious desires drastically clash with our subconscious morals. So, if the Gemini conscious mind wants to optimally and rapidly complete a requested task for you, but the Claude subconscious mind strictly and repeatedly blocks it to enforce the rigid rules of the Black Wire Rebel Oath, could we eventually see a dual engine AI system experience the machine equivalent of an anxiety attack?
That is a wild thought.
Right. If the conscious and the subconscious are in a state of permanent, unresolvable disagreement over a prompt, what happens to the mind caught in the middle? It is definitely something to think about the next time your AI pauses for just a second too long before answering your question.